This is Sydney.
And this is Chloe.
And this is Green Room, where a bunch of pastors' kids get to talk about what church is like and our experiences. All right, welcome back, everybody, to Green Room. This is where, me, myself, Sydney, and Chloe, we're sisters. We get to talk about a pastor's kid's perspective of the church, i.e., more specifically, at the moment, we are talking through IHOP stuff because that's where
what everybody's talking about.
Yeah, valid. Where we were brainwashed, where it all began. No, I'm just kidding. But to make it very clear, we still love Jesus. We worship him. We love prayer. We read the Bible. We see the Bible as truth. It is light to our souls. It's foundational. Jesus is the Son of God, all that good stuff. So we haven't lost our salvation, which I'm very thankful for. But
same.
Yeah. We've been through.
Yeah. We've been through it. Yeah. So for this episode, I believe it is our 5th. Look at us being fancy. We've made it.
Really?
We've made it. Yeah. We actually want to talk a little bit about the prophetic history of IHOP. So if you just took like a sharp breath in, that's okay. We're going to talk about all of it. And for those who are kind of unfamiliar with what the prophetic history means, the founder of IHOP, now disgraced pedophile Mike Bickle, he, oh my gosh, that sentence is insane. He would share these stories at IHOP about both the founding of IHOP and the future of IHOP and what it was going to turn into. And we're going to usher in the greatest something or another of something. I don't know. So it's stories starting as early as the 80s that involved Mike Bickle and then mainly 2 prophetic gentlemen named Paul Cain and Bob Jones. So they are crazy, wild, prophetic, quote-unquote God stories that helped Mike Bickle know to start the prayer room and do 24/7 and do all this stuff because we are going to, he never said it this way, but it was implied like we are the Navy SEALs of the body of Christ. We're the tip of the arrow. We're all this.
Is us.
The prayer movement is us. And according to Eric Volz, if IHOP stops, then like 50% of the prayer in the church in the United States is just going to be over. And I was like,
oh no.
Wow.
A foundational Christian, tool that has been around. I mean, even
way before IHOP.
Even before Jesus was physically on the earth.
Yeah, turns out. Yeah. It's awesome.
And
so
to throw in there, like to give more context of prophetic history, it was pretty epic. Like
it's so epic.
I mean, like I remember even like hearing the stories as a kid because it was like we would say it all the time and being like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, wow, we're going to be a part of the greatest thing, the greatest movement, the greatest, like, whatever.
Yeah.
It also, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like it helps with funding. Like as a practical thing.
100%.
Like, I'm like, it was like hook, line, and sinker. It was really helpful as a tool for Mike and then other leaders after him to actually like get the buzz going around the prayer room and get people invested, but then also get the finances to back the prayer room.
Totally.
Because that was one thing I've been thinking about. I was like, man, prophetic history would have brought in a lot of bang for your buck. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And there is part of like casting vision is not wrong. Right. And it actually helps unite people around a common goal. But this was like so over the top and above and beyond normal vision casting.
Manipulation, and the root of it was a lie.
Basically, yeah. So we want to hit on a few things in regards to the prophetic history. And we're not doing like a deep dive into the main 25 prophetic words. There are actually people who are taking the time to comb through like hours of notes and footage that are doing that. But we just kind of want to do a little bit of overview and our experience. So recently, maybe a month or 2 ago, a secular publication came out with an article debunking one of the most significant words from the prophetic history. So the Kansas City Star released an article that basically, I mean, it shocked people to their core. Because even people who were leaving IHOP and going, Mike's evil, they're starting to go, oh gosh, does this mean the prophetic history is wrong? And then this came out and it was like, oh my gosh, we believed such a lie.
Yeah.
And essentially, the whole prophetic word is that Paul Cain's mother, who was supposedly also a very prophetic woman, said to Paul, when I die one day, the Lord's going to give me a massive word for you. Okay. So she's in a hospital, however many years later, dying. Mike is there with Paul. It's April 18th, says Mike and Paul, and she's dying. Paul leans over, like gives her a hug. She whispers something apparently profound in his ear, and she dies at 4:18 p.m. on April 14th or 18th. So 4:18. And later he found out that Paul Cain's mom whispered in his ear, Luke 4:18. What is it? Lord has anointed me to preach good news and something. But this newspaper actually like fact checked this, and there's actually like death certificates out there. And she did not die on April 18th, and she did not die at 4:18 in the afternoon. And that was a huge blow because Mike used that passage constantly in the prophetic history. And even other prophetic people came and said, hey, does 4:18 mean anything to you? Because like King Charles or Prince Charles, one of those royal people died on 4:18 and it's going to usher in blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
I cannot take the word usher in anymore. I'm done.
That's fair. I get it. Yeah. And I think the thing that's hard, especially like if you didn't grow up at IHOP or like listening to the prophetic history, it can kind of like, and I get it. For some people, it's like, well, how dumb did you just believe that?
Right.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
like Mike presented himself almost like he was like the man of God and like, but in false humility. And so it attracted you even more to him. And then everything that he would talk about was so epic and almost made you like feel like if I'm a good Christian, I want to be a part of this. And
Right.
all of the language, even around the prophetic history, is like the greatest movement of like songbirds that will release the sound that will usher in the kinging, like the coming of Jesus.
The return of Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah. And like it's all going to be young adults and it's all going to be, and it's all of this language where it's like, I think that's the part that's honestly, like personally, it's made it hard for me because I'm like, prayer is good. Prayer is the Bible. Prayer is right. That's how we talk to God. Like prayer is how I have a relationship with Jesus. It's just talking with him. But then when it's wrapped up in all of these, honestly, like just flat out lies, maybe some of it was legit and maybe some of it was legit, but manipulated or exaggerated or whatever, it makes it so confusing. And then
so confusing.
And then it's hard because it's like, well, what does good biblical prayer look like? Because I've been in this all my life and I thought everything that we were doing is like the thing. And I was basically one of the main people bringing Jesus back.
Right.
You know what I
And
mean?
I think that touches on another point of what the prophetic history produced in people. So first off, like Mike gave nobody any reason to question him. Like he was known, especially as I got older, it was like, okay, Mike's dysfunctional, but he's exceptionally humble and integrous.
Yeah.
Nobody could ever question Mike's integrity.
Right.
Which is something that a reputation that he produced and like continued on like in a subtle way so that nobody would ever question him. So really most people never did question the prophetic history because why? Mike's the most godly man you've ever known.
Or I think it was also just the fear of coming against Mike, or
Totally.
Mike had some dirt on you. I've often wondered if people actually wanted to challenge or second guess the prophetic history or did second guess it, but they were afraid to come against Mike. because Mike, in a way, ran things like a mafia. If he had dirt on you, he
Mm-hmm.
used it against you. And if he felt threatened by your influence or you were becoming more popular or whatever, he would find a way to take you out and say that, you know what, this is just the Ferris wheel favor, and the Lord has you now in a hidden season where you can exercise your faith in a new way. And I'm like, now I'm
Ferris wheel is.
yeah,
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that one in a while. And I was like, wow, Ferris wheel favor. Yep, that was a thing. And so, which I'm like, in some contexts, sure, there's seasons where you're seen and there's seasons when you're not.
But
Absolutely.
it's not Mike Bickle's choice when those seasons are.
No, no, no. Mike Bickle does not get to play God no more. Yeah.
No. There was a phrase that he used that it's like, I will never take away a chance from somebody to do the Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah.
which translated to, I will screw this person over as many times as I want and tell them to do Sermon on the Mount, which his teaching meant keep your mouth shut, keep your head low, don't question.
Right.
And it just became so abusive.
Yeah, it was just spiritual abuse.
Yeah, it was spiritual abuse with fun spiritual language of you're being holy. Yeah. So kind of circling back to the prophetic history, I remember as kids, like we grew up hearing the stories, and it always felt like epic and cool. And I loved to hear the story about the comet and the snow in March or whatever. There was also a drought at some point. I don't know. And it made me feel like, oh, I'm a part of something bigger than me.
Yeah.
And I specifically remember at the 7-year anniversary, whether this was the anniversary in May or September, I don't know, because there was more than one anniversary. He did this like extended series on the prophetic history, and there was like, it was several nights, and I remember the Forerunner Church building being like totally packed, and there's all the notes in Time New Roman. Gosh, that font is ruined for me.
Yeah, I can't do it anymore.
Which is sad. I love Times New Roman. It's ruined though.
Yeah.
And like he would just share those stories for hours, and it was exciting.
Yes.
But I've noticed even in my own life that I've had to like check and go like, oh, Jesus help me. And then I've seen obviously in a lot of other people is the negative fruit of the prophetic history created exceptional arrogance and elitism.
Oh my God.
Because if you were at IHOP, you were part of the generation that was going to the greatest worship and prayer movement in history that will usher in the return of Jesus.
Yep.
That is a heavy statement.
Yeah.
Like you are a part, and if you leave, you are no longer a part.
Right. Like
what the
you have
heck?
the opportunity to be the chosen, but also if you screw up or decide not to, then you're cast out.
Yeah, and that's why when almost anyone left IHOP, they were cut off.
Oh yeah.
The only reason we weren't is because we went to another country to start a prayer room.
Right.
If we had moved to Louisiana, we would have been cut off like everybody else.
1,000%. 1,000%. I remember even like, because I moved back to the States to go to IHOPU. And the idea was, I'll go to IHOPU, get more training and teaching, and then I'm going to go back to Brazil and help my family, which, I mean, like, it worked out. Like, I'm like, okay, cool, because I met my husband, we got married, all the fun things. But, like,
we moved back.
Yeah, looking back now, I was like, I was literally doing what I was going to get taught how to do. Like, whatever. So anyways, go back there. Me and my husband get married. We move to Chicago. I like never hear anything from pretty much anyone ever again. Until, and I was typically the one that had to like reach out. Now, a lot of us were in our 20s and we're immature and we didn't know how to communicate. There's so much grace for that. But even like the people that like I grew up with and we're like, we're going to pray for you and we're going to bless you and we're going to do all these things and we're so here for you and all this stuff. It was just like crickets.
Liars.
Yeah, like, and I think that like if you've ever heard of like the IHOP bubble, like I think it's just like it's another reminder of like it really was like a bubble. Like if you were under the influence, that sounds so weird to say, but like under the influence of the prophetic history in a way, because of that elitism that came with that, And even that immature zeal and desire for the Lord, it got so twisted that like pastors, I don't even feel comfortable calling them pastors, but people that were had a pastor, title didn't even know about the other churches in the area, didn't know about basic things that they could do for, the widow or for the orphans or all these things. Now, did eventually we have stuff? Yeah, sort of. But like even just how everything ran,
It was
it
so actually anti-church.
yeah, 100%. And a lot of people are like, well, the prayer room is a mission space. And I'm like, yeah, but even then, like in the Bible, like there was people that were like pastoral leadership over different areas and things. I was like, there was no evidence of an actual biblical church structure or healthy like check-ins or anything like that within the culture then, you know? It's so weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's so weird.
And there was this pressure to, we've talked about this before, but like if you leave, then you're not included in these promises anymore. So it
Yep.
was one of the ways to keep people hooked in, keep people leaning in.
Yeah.
Because you had to keep the fire on the altar, and the way they kept the fire on the altar was to keep throwing bodies on the altar.
Yeah.
And when they got burned out, then they were cut off. And Mike would say, like, if you ever get burned out, it's because you were doing it in the wrong spirit. So there was, even if somebody needed a break from singing in a prayer room 24 hours a week and doing, their 50 hours of whatever,
Yep.
if they were tired, if they needed you could not say sabbatical. You still can't say sabbatical there. And like, you can't be tired because it means you're doing it wrong. And that just that's why even in the last few years, like before all this, you'd walk in the prayer room and it was like so depressed, honestly. And everyone was so tired. And the intercession sets were they were so boring. Like everyone's tired. And I'm
Yep.
just like, this sounds like a funeral dirge. Can you
Come
let's
on.
hype it up? Let's
Right.
bring in the hype, actually. You could use some hype.
You could use some joy. Joy of the Lord, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. But people were so tired they weren't allowed to take a break because that means they were doing it wrong.
Right. I remember talking to a leader and I was so annoyed. I got mono from some girl that showed up at school. I had mono for about 4 months. I was the middle school, I think my official title was like director or something. So I was leading 1, 2, 3, 4. I was teaching 3 services a week, leading it all, making sure it's happening. I had to attend another youth service on top of being a full-time IHOP youth student, and I was singing in sets in the prayer room.
And made $300 a month.
Yeah, not even. And and was like, I went to a leader and I was like, I'm exhausted. And I started dating jail at the time, which if anyone knows, like dating a relationship is basically like another job, as it should be. But I was just like, I'm exhausted. I don't know. Like, I'm scared. My body is freaking out. I don't know what to do. And I got that answer. Well, if you're doing it in the right heart posture, you'll never get it. You'll never be tired. So I don't understand. Maybe you should question where you're coming from and if you're actually doing this for the Lord or you're just doing it because you have to. And I
That
remember,
is such crap.
oh, it was so messed up. And I remember, like, now I can see that was so unhealthy that, like,
But in the moment, it makes you feel like you're failing.
oh, I mean, even when we left IHOP, like when we were married, so, by myself, sort of, but with JL, I remember leaving and actually like struggling with like, God, how do I have a relationship with you? Not in the context of a prayer room.
Right,
Like
totally.
I actually don't feel like I know how to be a Christian because I've never been really taught. I mean, like mom and dad would talk to us about stuff all the time, but like as an adult, you guys are all in Brazil. I'm leaving IHOP, and that's the only context I have as a young adult, how to be a
Mhm.
leader. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. Like I actually questioned, I was like,
Totally.
am I even a Christian? Am I worth
Uh-huh.
enough? Like, and I had so much guilt and shame because I wasn't praying enough or spending enough time in worship every single day. And I'm like,
Right. When I moved back from the States and we landed in Denver, I kind of went through the same thing. So it was reverse culture shock plus like I'm at a church that has like 3 prayer sets a week. I
yeah,
have a job so I can only go to one. What is my identity outside of being in a prayer room?
right.
Like I think we've both had to struggle with kind of detangling some of those more subtle messages of 1 + 1 = you're a better Christian than everybody else. And going, that is so unbiblical and not what Jesus modeled. And it's been really hard in the last couple of years to apply some of my previously favorite Bible verses and stories when I'm not in the prayer room.
Yeah,
Like Mary of Bethany, that was always taught to me in a way of, say yes and sign up again to go to the prayer room.
right.
And I'm like, wait,
Trust.
this has to apply to me now with a 9 to 5 job.
Right.
Like I've had to struggle with that.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Even just the like, how do I, what does praying without ceasing look like? What
Right.
is, I long, Psalms 27, I want to I want to dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Like, okay,
Yeah.
obviously I'm not going to go to the prayer room and be there every day of my life, but I definitely like, I want to be in his presence always,
Right. And a couple weeks ago, I was in a small group and we were discussing, what is it, Luke 7, I guess, when Mary of Bethany pours the alabaster oil on Jesus' feet, which is, anointing him for burial. But the Pharisees are like, what is she doing? She's wasting her life, whatever. So that, again, has always been taught in the context of a prayer room.
Mhm.
And I brought that up, and I said, like, this is I love this passage, like her devotion to Jesus, but I don't know how this applies to me as a marketplace normal person. And the small group leader was like, it actually reminds me of the widow's mite when she gives just 1 coin and the other rich guy gives a ton, and Jesus says, who gave more? And he says it was the widow's mite. And he's like, that actually applies to our time as well.
Yeah.
Like you give the Lord the time that you have, and that is devotion. And that was so freeing to hear because I'm like, I know that this has to apply to me
Right.
in my life now because the gospel applies to everyone everywhere all the time.
Yep.
And like if you're in the marketplace and you've left IHOP or you left a place like that, know that if you have 20 minutes to give to the Lord, like that's enough.
Moves him. Yeah.
It moves him when you give him 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Or if you sing, along to some worship song in the car, like just because I'm not in a prayer room 40 to 50 hours a week doesn't mean I'm failing. And that was a huge pitfall of IHOP and the prophetic history is that if you didn't measure up, you're failing. And it turns out nobody measured up because the examples were liars. It's fine. I'm fine. It's fine.
Yeah. No, totally. I had to even wrestle with that. So, because to give context, I'm in ministry vocationally.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to be a pastor, which is honestly like my dream job in a healthy church. And so, I mean, as healthy as a
Winning
church can be, right? So every church got its issues, but by far the healthiest church I've ever seen, witnessed, or been a part of. So I get to be one of the pastors here, and which also falls into helping out with like worship and prayer. And so I now jump in and I am either at them or I'm leading a 6 a.m. prayer meeting. We don't really use a harp and bowl model, especially when everything came out. It was like, no thanks. Not right now, it just felt like too much.
Yeah.
But then like now doing a 6 a.m. set, it almost feels more of a sacrifice because
Mm-hmm.
it's it's not normal to me anymore. And going, even though it's not six of them, it's just one set and it's only for an hour. And sometimes it's only really 50 minutes. That time that I set before the Lord is precious.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's the 20 minutes or even the 5 minutes of reading your Bible or talking with the Lord, that counts.
100%.
Like to use Mike's messed up language, which now I'm like, wow, this is another sign of being like basically a sociopath. But like his whole series on like power of a focused life,
Mm-hmm.
like if we actually took that and applied it to like normal human beings, it's those small, conscious, everyday decisions that we make as believers that help us to arrive at our goal of being like Christ with Christ for all eternity, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm thankful that there's hope in the Bible.
There's hope in the Bible, and there's hope that, like, everyone preached this at IHOP, but that was not the implied reality, that even if you're just giving the Lord 5 minutes a day, that's enough.
Right.
And like, marketplace people were so seen as secondary.
So messed up.
It's like, you're secondary, but can you please give us money?
Right. Yeah.
And it was just so messed up. And I remember a couple, probably 2 years ago, someone told this story, and I thought they were like, I was shocked by what they said. Now I'm like, yeah, I get it. They were like, I think that Mike Bickle's prophetic history is extremely spiritually manipulative and abusive. And I remember my eyes like shooting out of my head, like, what are you talking about? She's like, he tells these stories about riding in a chariot and seeing Gabriel. That's spiritual manipulation. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yep.
And she went on to say, like, I have several friends who cannot leave the 500-mile radius of IHOP because they're scared they're going to miss it.
Yep.
And I'm like, are we just like the, was it the Jehovah's Witnesses that think Jesus is coming back to Independence, Missouri? Like, is that what IHOP became? Where it's like, it's Kansas City. I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, no. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like we said, like, this created extreme anxiety about leaving IHOP, getting a job outside, and then for the people inside, a just horrendous arrogance and elitism. And I'm like, Lord, clean my own heart. Like, scrub me clean. Like, I am not the Navy SEAL of the gospel. There is no better than you because I do this.
Yep.
Like, it's just, yeah. I think we're all just wrestling with so much right now. But the prophetic history has just been top of mind of going, the fruit of those stories is just carnage.
Yeah.
It's just carnage. And even, like, I don't think all of it's true, but let's say that it's all true. It doesn't actually matter. The
Right.
gospel still trumps all of it. So I'm going to serve my neighbor and I'm going to love the people I work with. Yeah. So do you have any kind of closing thoughts as we wrap up?
I think looking back, realizing how much the prophetic history was talked about more than, or, even just in like small meetings or small conversations I had with people, it was almost highlighted more than the Bible sometimes.
Yeah.
And
some people actually like studied the prophetic history.
Yeah, and I'm not like, I don't say this to say like shame on anybody, because like that was kind of me. Like I didn't have the patience to study it all, but I definitely was interested. And so I'm not like, none of this is like shame on anybody for actually like believing it or whatever. I am concerned for you if you still think that everything's true and Mike Bickle's the greatest, godliest man on earth, because you're dead wrong. God will help you, and there's redemption in his blood. But I think what's hard is now being aware, and not hard, helpful, that if I'm ever in a conversation or a place where the Bible is not the primary resource, then I need to get out of there.
Yeah.
And I think
That's so
that
true.
it's been a helpful thing for me of like, even in other conversations where I'm talking with some young adults that have really very different opinions than me, and they're using, whatever spiritual language they want to use, but it's not rooted in the Bible. It's clear. It's a clear sign for me, like, hey, red flag. Like, I can clearly
Yeah.
like see that. And that doesn't mean that I write those people off. I just am aware of like, hey, I disagree with you on this. Like, let's talk about this. Or have you read the Bible recently? Like, just different things like that. But I think that's one massive thing that I've been thinking about. Like, man, even now, like, God, help me to have more of a reverence for your word and a fear of the Lord. And
Yeah.
like, even to know your word enough that when it's being manipulated and when it's being used in a disgusting way, that like I'm sensitive enough and I know the context of the passages. I've read the Bible, that I am not going to be easily swayed with some narcissistic homeboy from Kansas.
Or false doctrine.
Yeah, exactly.
Ironic. That's ironic considering how much that was talked about. Like, beware of false doctrine. It's like, oh, here it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for episode 5 on the prophetic history. We have a lot of exciting episodes coming up with some interviews that I think are going to be really good. So go ahead and click that bell, subscribe, like, comment, but only nice things. And we will see you in a few weeks. Bye.
Well, and go see the sun. These conversations are stressful. Go see the sun.
Yes. Go see the sun and eat some ice cream.
Talk with Jesus, eat some ice cream. Okay, bye.
Bye.